What's up, folks? We're here in Stu's Garage, and today we're going to be putting the long tubes on finally. So we've got the BBK long tubes and BBK H-pipe. They're going on. Chayton, the Mustang Guru, is here to help me out.
We love, baby.
And we've got a few other parts, as you can see on the table behind me. We got brand new poly motor mounts, trans mount, Percy's gasket, which came highly recommended. And I'm going to show you the difference between the Percy's gasket and the Mr. Gasket aluminum gasket. And the last part that we're going to put on is the solid steering rod, which you guys saw in my last video that we fabricated. So first up, what we're going to do is disconnect the stock mid pipe and disconnect that from the headers. All right, so here underneath, we're at the back of the mid pipe, and we're just going to get this disconnected. It's only 4 bolts. Should come apart fairly easy. Okay, the back side of the exhaust is unbolted. It wasn't as easy as I thought it would be, even though these are brand new bolts. Looked like the heat distorted them and they seized on there. So 2 of them had to be cut off. So that's that. The next thing we're gonna do is disconnect the down pipes, and that's fairly easy to do. You can easily get to this top bolt from the top if you just connect a lot of extensions together. You can hit directly on the top bolt like that. The other one, which you can't see from the top, is easily reached from the bottom with a wrench. If you have the studs because you have stock headers, then everything you're going to do is from the bottom. So with this one, with the bolts, one person's going to hold it at the top, and then you can loosen it from underneath. Good. Don't forget to remove your O2 sensor. More than likely, it will not be this easy for you. This is a new O2 sensor that we just put in here, and you're definitely going to have an interesting time if you have stock ones on there. Now that we've removed the mid pipe, the next thing you're going to do is pop your plug wires out, get those out of the way. You're going to do that on both sides, and then you're going to hit your header bolts and get those out. All right, we've got both headers disconnected now, and they're ready to come out. The other side is already out. So that's what a shorty looks like, and that's the Mr. Gasket, which we're going to look at in just a second. All right, so this is the Mr. Gasket, and if you look, you can see the lines traveling out from the perimeter of where the port is, and that's how you can actually see where it was exhaust leaking. So this thing was actually leaking pretty bad. Looks like every port, and the other side is pretty bad as well. You can see all the leaks. So anyway, the Percy's, this is the Mr. Gasket. It's pretty thick. It looks like, like 5 or 6 layers of aluminum, and it's pretty hefty, and it crushes down. It's supposed to conform to your head and your header. This is the Percy's gasket, which comes highly recommended. As you can see, it's concave on one side and convex on the other side. The smooth side is what's supposed to go up against the head, and this is only 2 layers. So we'll see how well this thing works. If it doesn't work, I don't even know. We'll try copper next. But that's a comparison. This is what the 2 gaskets look like. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull out the old steering shaft so that we can replace it. There's only 2 bolts that hold the steering shaft in. You've got this bolt down here, which is a 14, and this bolt up here, up top, which I'm not sure right now. So this bolt is facing up. There's not a lot of space. We're going to turn the wheel to the side and put the 14 on here, and the spline should pop loose. All right, to install the steering shaft, we actually ended up pulling out the second thing. This may be, I don't know what you call this, maybe the steering column. We actually ended up pulling that out, which may or may not be a good idea, but it just slides directly in and out. The important thing is to make sure that when you put it back in, your wheels are oriented straight. That way you don't get it all jacked up and your alignment is not funky with your wheel cocked to the side. So we're gonna slide this piece back in there after we put the headers in, because with the steering shaft out, we actually have space here on the driver's side to put the header in. The other thing you want to do is disconnect your motor mount from down here. This is your nut here. You can go underneath or from the top because it's really easy to get to the bolt. Pop your motor mount loose, and then we're going to raise the motor so that we have space on the passenger side to get the header in. Alright, so what we're doing here is we're actually raising the motor up off of the motor mounts so that we can manipulate it and push it side to side, and that's going to allow us the clearance that we need to get the long tubes in. Alright, it's a very tight fit, but what we have is just like we showed you. We raised up the motor in the front just a little bit. We disconnected the motor mounts. The trans mount is still in place. You don't need to disconnect that just yet. And we pushed the motor side to side, and we were able to slide this down in there. One thing, you may need to remove your throttle position sensor, but there's no need to remove your starter. That's still in place, and the header's down there, and so we're going to go ahead and bolt that up. And on the other side, that's actually got plenty of room to go in, so we'll show you that in a second. Alright, we're down underneath the car. It's tight quarters. As you can see right there, the new motor mount is installed. Just a couple of things I wanted to point out. This is your clearance between the starter and the headers. You're not going to need a shorty starter or a mini starter or whatever they call it, and we never even took the starter loose. You do want to pay special attention to your ground strap here. Make sure that that's clear of your header, and this is on your passenger side. Over here on the driver's side, an area of concern is going to be your clutch cable, because again, that's a very tight clearance. People complain that those do burn up. The other thing is nothing else I can really see. The last thing is your steering shaft. When you go to put it in, it's going to be a pretty tight fit. You can push the steering shaft up towards your dashboard. If you think you can't push it anymore, trust me, you can. Just push a little bit harder. It can probably travel about 8 inches in towards the dash. So you just push it in there. The spline will line up, and then you have to pull it down onto the spline, which I haven't finished pulling it all the way down because it's definitely a lot of friction. So we're going to pull that down. We're going to set the lock screw, and then there's another screw that goes on top of here, and that'll be all set. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and throw in our new trans mount. And to do that, all you got to do is take loose your transmission cross member. It's one bolt across on each side and the 2 bolts down there. Once you've removed the 2 bolts from the bottom of the cross member, it'll actually pop straight down, and you don't have to actually remove the other side. It just pivots straight down. And ooh, that looks terrible. You have a bolt here, and you have one more on the other side. Remove those, and the bushing will come straight out. We left off yesterday installing the new transmission mount. So that's in there. That's bolted in tight. I've been wasting time for like 2 hours just cleaning up the engine bay, rerunning some ugly wires. I still have to connect the plug wires on this side, but everything is pretty much buttoned up, and we're going to set the car on the ground and get ready to start it. I do still need to connect the H pipe, but I definitely want to give it a rip one time with the open headers just to see what that sounds like. So you'll be hearing that in a little bit. Alright folks, that's going to conclude our video for the day. Just a quick review of what you saw. We did the motor mounts, transmission mounts, solid steering rack, and of course the long tube headers. My first impressions on everything is, honestly, I didn't expect to see a whole lot of improvement out of these, maintenance items. But actually, the long tubes actually make the car a lot more snappy. I had to be gentle with it because the air fuel gauge was reading lean off the charts and I didn't really want to do any damage to the motor. Plus the exhaust was dragging on the ground, and really didn't want to damage that because the Terminator exhaust is pretty hard to come by. So you'll see more of that in the future, but unfortunately that's the only open header run that I'm going to do. Surprisingly, the open headers actually did sound pretty nice. Way better than the open shorty headers, which sounded horrible. Unfortunately, it's obnoxiously loud. I'm being a really bad neighbor right now because it's like 1 a.m. and I just drove through the neighborhood with open long tubes. Sorry folks, but I had to do it. What else? The motor mounts made a huge difference. They really tightened up the car. Probably just because the mounts that I had were absolutely shot. The transmission feels more solid. It shifts better. There is more vibration at idle. For one, because I have the cam, and two, because I have poly mounts and I've got them as tight as they can be. So they're actually pretty close to being solid mounts. But it's good feel for the car. And lastly, the steering shaft. I wasn't really sure what to expect out of that. That actually made a huge difference. So the steering on the car went from being like a 1 out of 10 to being, I give it a solid 5. It's still not great, but you have to actually drive a Fox body to understand how crappy the steering feel actually is in a stock Fox body. It's identical to driving an old Lincoln Town car. You can spin the wheel with one finger. There was absolutely no feel. So at least with the solid steering shaft, it actually feels normal. So that's a quick review on everything. You're going to see a little bit more of it later once the exhaust is fully installed. I'm not going to bother making a video for that because it's really just 4 bolts. You lift it in there and you bolt it to the front and bolt it to the rear. Hopefully I didn't damage it tonight driving around scraping the pipes. But that's it for our video. Thanks for watching, folks. Like and subscribe. See you guys next time.